company or developing for the platform exclusively. So it's kind of a bit of a farce.
Well, I think I've been rather rude. Gordon, I don't know if you have any inputs or anything you want to mention about the Chrome operating system, or any observations you've made while this thing's been running. Anything you want to add?
Well, I've not really been keeping an eye on much on Chrome OS as such. I mean, the thing that Google have always seemed to do, and from what I can see, is they throw an awful lot of things at the wall, and the vast majority don't stick. But the few that do stick, they can actually work with and make them a fortune. So I wonder if Chrome OS is just one of many things that they throw at the wall. And I don't know. I mean, the impression I get is, as was mentioned, you've got Android and Chrome OS. They're both portable sort of operating systems. What's the difference? One is kind of designed for a touch screen, and the other is kind of designed for a keyboard, for use with a keyboard. And that seems to be the difference. I don't know. But yeah, as I've kind of worked out, or what appears to me anyway, is that Chrome OS is just something that's on the back burner. It's one of many things that Google are trying to do. It may or may not take off. It's sort of, we'll see. There's certainly other operating systems, like, as you said, Peppermint and various others like Jolly Cloud and whatever, that work on the whole cloud concept. So Chrome OS is certainly not unique anymore in that regard.
I mean, just very quickly to touch on the point of Google throwing a lot of things at the wall to see what sticks. I know I'm hoping we can cover in a future episode about Google Wave. I was one of the early beta testers. I got invited quite early on in its development life, and obviously now it's been killed by Google. And I thought that was the fantastic project, and to this day I still can't understand why it failed, why it didn't get taken up, and why the sort of mainstream, if you will, or the majority didn't like it. I thought it was one of the best social networking live chat type systems I'd ever come across.
So it's not exactly. It's been passed to Apache now.
Yeah,
as far as,
that's.
I don't know if it's accepted or what the status is exactly. I think it's been accepted as far as them confirming it's been passed or will be passed very soon. But did you hear about the acquisition today? Google, I think, spent $6 billion on a company expanding in the one area that they do pretty well. I very often think of Chrome OS as kind of a browser with like whatever around it, kind of like there's some, Linux and things kind of around it. And what they try and do is basically give you something even subsidized to get ads and do some other things like go to sites. But the main purpose is for them to have control over the platform. And I'm not criticizing them exactly because I think it's good that they spread Linux if they manage to do that, and they can actually subsidize the thing, which kind of kills all kinds of things like Jollybook because they don't have the same business model, and Microsoft has the same issue. But with Chrome OS, I don't exactly like the normalization of restrictions. Like you want to just have the browser, you don't want to do anything with your root partition. It's just going to be read-only mode and all kinds of things which were supposed to make you feel comfortable. Like, look, we give you Rails and we give you assistive wheels and everything else, and people will, just as they do with Android, they might accept the so-called shop and DRM and remote kill switches and things, and just think, that's great, that's Linux, but it's not exactly the vision that they had originally for, an open and free platform. So I know Google will put Linux in the mainstream. It already does, in the sense that it outsells Windows Mobile by 15 to 1 based on anecdotes. So it's already kicking Microsoft's ass in many ways, and even Apple is really afraid of Google and trying to sue Android or to sue at least Motorola and HTC and these companies. So Google is bringing Linux to the mainstream. It actually brings to the mainstream its own brand, which is Android, which barely mentions anything about Linux. But
Well,
I think
the thing to remember here is Google is not an open source company. They do support, they are kind of schizophrenic when it comes to open source. They do, they adopt it when it's convenient to Google, but they keep it at sort of arm's length when it's not convenient. Certainly they do Summer of Code, and Summer of Code has produced so much good stuff for Linux, and for free software in general. And Summer of Code is not just things that Google use themselves. Google employees do work on lots of free software that Google don't even use. So you have to applaud them for that. And they pay, money to have that code developed, and train people and all that. But, and they also use, Linux as their back end for all their servers. So if you use Google, you use Linux. You may not realize it, but you do. If you use any Google services, Google Mail, Google Docs, Google Search, whatever, you use Linux. As much as Microsoft may scream and moan about that, tough. That's the way it is. Google use Linux. But Google is not a free software. They're not a FOSS company. They happen to use it and happen to help promote it at times, but they're not a FOSS company.
Well, after that...
That's true now. I should just very quick remark, that's true for most of the companies behind Linux, as in the kernel. All the backers, if you look at Linux Foundation, just about all of them, except very few, are companies that are associated with free open source software.
Well, what we'll do, we'll move on to the next, because like I say, we're trying to be punchier for these headlines. So Roy, do you want to, since I did the last... title, do you want to do another headline?
I've been so occupied looking at the Wikileaks thing. It's probably because I don't care so much about the politics in there. I care more about the technological issues with that. I find lots of people, even if you look around Identica in recent days, or even Twitter and all kinds of conversations, even when I switch on the TV, and I don't put on the TV, but I go past TVs here sometimes. And you see it's everywhere, essentially, and it takes over people's conversations. And people, instead of talking about free software, they talk about the transparency and, should we share things, should we share documents, and should scrutinize the government. And that's been a major thing. We talked about it 2 days ago, actually. The other thing is the TSA. That's been off the headlines, mostly because of WikiLeaks, I think. People don't talk about TSA now. And copyrights, again, that's just minor issue as far as fighting big nasty or supposedly nasty authorities concerned. People just look at their own governments now, because the WikiLeaks thing has everything on everyone now. You see things in Germany and in the Middle East and in Europe, the rest of Europe, United States, just so global. So everyone's just looking at the Cablegate now.
Just looking at the WikiLeaks, touching on it very quickly, I might as well do the little bit of feedback in respect to that. Now, I got challenged by a very nice chap, and I hope I'm pronouncing his handle right on Identica, Satipera. He made a comment in regards to some of the views that I aired about WikiLeaks on the last episode, and I'll read exactly what his dent said. It says, the private and public views are only one aspect of the latest WikiLeaks. You should familiarise yourself and not dismiss so easy. And if I may, I'll just give a quick response to that, because I think when we were discussing it before, maybe I didn't make my complete view as clear as I should have done. My view of the whole WikiLeaks scandal, if you will, I said at the time that a lot of people are like myself believe that what we read in the papers and in the press and what's said by, say, ambassadors or people in government positions of power, what they say to one person is not what they say behind closed doors. And I think it's human nature to say we do it at work ourselves, probably, where you'll speak to one person and say one thing, and then obviously behind closed doors there'll be another thing said. My view of WikiLeaks still is that there is generally, and I asked this question around the office today when I got this dent through to me, what people thought, were they interested enough to go and actually read it? And it was probably about a 90% ratio that weren't interested.